Marcus Chen wiped sweat from his forehead as he adjusted the atmospheric processor for the 1000th time this cycle. The machine hummed steadily, its blue glow casting strange shadows across the barren landscape of Kepler 442c. 12 years he had been alone on this dead rock. 12 years since the Galactic Council had exiled him for what they called reckless intervention in prohibited worlds. The irony was not lost on him. They had sent him to die on a planet where nothing could live. Yet here he stood, breathing air he had slowly coaxed from poisoned soil and dead stone. His shelter was a marvel of human engineering and stubbornness. Built from salvaged materials and powered by fusion cells he had jury-rigged to last decades instead of months, it stood as a testament to human refusal to simply lay down and die. The walls were lined with growing chambers where he cultivated the only life this planet had seen in millennia. Earth plants modified with genetic templates he had memorized during his years as a terraforming specialist. Marcus walked through his greenhouse, checking on tomatoes that grew in soil he had created, molecule by molecule, breathing air he had stolen from rock and processed through plants that should never have survived here. The council had expected him to last maybe 6 months. They had underestimated human spite. The communication array crackled with static. For 12 years, it had been silent, except for automated distress signals that no one would answer. Marcus had long ago stopped hoping for rescue. This was his world now, and he was determined to make it live again, even if he died in the process. He was calibrating the mineral extractor when the first impossible thing happened. A ship appeared on his sensors. Marcus stared at the display, certain it was another malfunction. Ships did not come to Kepler 442c. This was a dead end. A graveyard world used only to dispose of inconvenient people like himself. Yet there it was, a sleek vessel of unfamiliar design, descending through the thin atmosphere he had spent years thickening. The ship landed in a cloud of dust near his shelter. Marcus grabbed his sidearm, a habit from his military days that had never left him, and watched through his reinforced windows as 3 figures emerged. They were tall, easily 7 feet, with elongated limbs and movements that spoke of predatory grace. Their skin was a deep purple-black that seemed to absorb light, and their eyes glowed with an inner fire. Most distinctive were the bone-white weapons that grew from their forearms like natural armor. These were Kithara, the galaxy's most feared hunters. Marcus had heard stories of the Kithara during his service. They were said to be unstoppable trackers who hunted across star systems for sport and honor. No human had ever faced one in single combat and lived. Now 3 of them stood outside his door. The lead hunter approached his shelter with measured steps. When she reached the entrance, she did something that Marcus could not have predicted in 1,000 years. She knocked. The sound echoed through his shelter like thunder. In 12 years of exile, nothing and no one had knocked on his door. The Kithara warrior waited, patient as stone, while her companions flanked the entrance with professional precision. Marcus checked his weapon, took a deep breath of the air he had made from nothing, and opened the door. The lead hunter was magnificent in a terrifying way. Her skin bore scars that told of countless battles, and her weapons gleamed with the dull sheen of something that had tasted blood many times. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Marcus Chen, former specialist of the Terran Engineering Corps, exile of the Galactic Council. Her words were precise, spoken in perfect standard galactic. We have tracked you across the void. Marcus kept his hand near his weapon, though he knew it would be useless against 3 Kithara hunters. Congratulations. You found a dead man on a dead world. Was it worth the trip? The hunter's expression did not change, but something flickered in her glowing eyes that might have been respect. This world is not dead. We can sense the life you have coaxed from sterile ground. The air carries the scent of growing things, where once there was only poison and dust. 12 years of work, Marcus replied. Still got a long way to go. Indeed. The hunter gestured to her companions, and they stepped back, lowering their weapons slightly. I am Veltar of the Third Hunt. My companions are Sekla and Mordun. We have come seeking the human gardener. The title hit Marcus like a physical blow. No one had called him that since his trial, Since the day the Council had condemned him for saving worlds they had written off as lost causes. On 7 different planets, he had done the impossible, brought life to places where others saw only death and worthless rock. The Council had called it interference with natural selection. Marcus had called it mercy. "There's no gardener here," Marcus said carefully. "Just an exile, growing food to stay alive." Veltar's laugh was like the sound of breaking crystal. "The human gardener who brought rain to Zirion's glass deserts, who seeded the methane storms of Vorlak with oxygen-producing microbes, who turned the radiation-soaked wastelands of Theta Prime into fertile plains." She stepped closer, and Marcus could see his own reflection in her predatory eyes. "You are known throughout the galaxy, Marcus Chen. Your legend has spread far beyond the Council's reach." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the thin air. "My legend? 7 worlds bloom because of your touch. Billions of beings live because you refused to accept that death was inevitable." Veltar's voice carried a note of something that sounded almost like awe. "The Kithara respect power, human. But we revere life-bringers. The Council exiled me for breaking their rules," Marcus said. "They sent me here to die. The Council are fools who mistake bureaucracy for wisdom." Sekla spoke for the first time, her voice carrying bitter contempt. "They see a list of regulations where you see potential for life." Mordoon nodded agreement. "The young ones ask questions about the human gardener. They wonder what kind of being can look at a dead world and see a garden." Marcus lowered his weapon slightly. "Why are you really here? Kithara don't make social calls." Veltar reached into a pouch at her side and withdrew something that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. It was a seed pod, but not like any he had ever seen. It pulsed with a soft inner light and seemed to move with its own life force. "From the garden worlds," Veltar explained. 7 seeds from 7 planets you saved. Each one adapted and evolved by the life you planted there." She held the pod toward him. "They carry the genetic memory of your work, the living proof of what you accomplished." Marcus stared at the impossible object. "That's not how genetics work. Seeds can't carry complex memories or—" "Human science cannot explain everything in the universe," Mordoon interrupted. "These are not merely seeds. They are the essence of life itself, shaped by your will and determination. The worlds you touched have grown beyond what even you imagined possible. The beings you saved have thrived," Sekla added. "They have spread to other worlds, carrying your genetic templates and modifications with them. Life finds a way to remember its saviors." Veltar stepped forward and placed the seed pod in Marcus's hands. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Your children, Marcus Chen. The life you created has called to us across the stars. They have a message for their father." "What message?" Marcus asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. "They are ready to come home," Veltar replied. "The garden worlds have matured beyond anything the galaxy has seen. They produce oxygen so pure it can terraform entire systems. Their soil can bring life to any dead rock in space. Their very presence can turn a wasteland into paradise." She gestured toward his atmospheric processor and growing chambers. "What you have accomplished here in 12 years, they could do in 12 days. Marcus looked around at his small shelter, at the life he had carved from nothing through sheer human stubbornness. "This is my home now. I've made my peace with exile." "Have you?" Veltar challenged. "Or have you simply been preparing for something greater?" The question hung in the recycled air like a challenge. Marcus thought of 12 years of isolation, 12 years of backbreaking work to coax a few plants from dead soil. He thought of the 7 worlds he had saved, now grown beyond his wildest dreams. He thought of the Galaxy Council that had cast him out for caring too much about life. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked. "The Kithara honor strength," Veltar said. "We have watched the Council grow weak and complacent, more concerned with maintaining order than preserving life. They waste resources on endless debates while worlds die around them. You want me to what? Overthrow the government? I'm one man on a dead planet. You are the human gardener," Sekla said with fierce pride. "You are the man who looks at impossible odds and finds a way to win." the man who sees life where others see only death. Mordoun stepped forward. The Cathara have a proposal. An alliance between our people and your living worlds. Together, we can spread life throughout the galaxy faster than the Council can debate whether it should be allowed. Marcus weighed the seed pod in his hands, feeling the pulse of life within it. And if I refuse? Then you continue your work here, as you always have. Veltar replied without hesitation. We will not force you, Marcus Chen. Honor demands that the choice be yours alone. The three hunters stood silently, waiting for his decision. Around them, the wind blew across the barren landscape he had been slowly transforming for 12 years. In his hands, the seed pod pulsed with the promise of life beyond imagination. Marcus looked at his shelter, at the machines that had kept him alive, and the plants that had given him purpose. Then he looked at the three alien warriors who had traveled across the galaxy to find him, who spoke of his work with something approaching reverence. How long do I have to decide? He asked. As long as you need, Veltar replied. We will wait. Marcus nodded and stepped back into his shelter. Still holding the impossible seed pod, through his windows, he could see the three Cathara hunters settling into positions around their ship, patient as the stone monuments they resembled. For the first time in 12 years, Marcus Chen was not alone on his dead world. The question was whether he was ready to leave it behind for something larger than he had ever imagined possible. The seed pod pulsed in his hands like a second heartbeat. And somewhere in its warm glow, Marcus thought he could hear the whispered voices of 7 worlds calling him home. Marcus spent the night staring at the seed pod, turning it over in his calloused hands as his shelter's systems hummed around him. The thing defied every principle of biology he knew. Seeds were storage vessels for genetic information, not repositories for memory or consciousness. Yet this one pulsed with warm life and seemed to respond to his touch with something that felt almost like recognition. At dawn, he found Veltar standing motionless beside his atmospheric processor, studying its jury-rigged components with the focus of a predator examining prey. The other 2 hunters had positioned themselves at strategic points around his compound. Alert, but not threatening. Your machine is crude, Veltar observed without preamble. Inefficient. Yet it accomplishes what Council terraformers claim requires decades and industrial-scale equipment. Marcus checked the processor's readings out of habit. When you don't have fancy tools, you make do with what works. The mark of true engineering skill, the hunter replied. To create solutions with limited resources. The Cathara value such ingenuity. Is that why you're really here? To recruit a maintenance technician? Veltar turned to face him, her glowing eyes intense. May I show you something? Marcus Chen? Without waiting for an answer, she activated a holographic projector on her wrist. The air shimmered and resolved into an image that took Marcus's breath away. It was a world, green and blue and alive, with cities that seemed to grow from the landscape itself rather than being imposed upon it. Vast forests stretched to horizons. But these were not chaotic wilderness. They were ordered, cultivated, designed with the same careful precision Marcus used in his greenhouse. Zerion, Veltar said simply. As it appears today. Marcus stared at the impossible vista. When he had last seen Zerion, it had been a dead ball of superheated glass and poisonous atmosphere. Written off by every terraforming company in the galaxy, the Council had planned to use it for weapons testing. This isn't possible, he whispered. The soil chemistry alone would take centuries to fix. Your microorganisms adapted, Sekla said, approaching from her position near the landing pad. They evolved beyond your initial programming. Within 5 years, they had converted the entire planetary atmosphere. Within 10, the glass desert had become fertile soil. But the population, Marcus began. 43 million beings now call Zerion home, Mordoun reported, joining them. Refugees from 17 different worlds, all living in harmony with the ecosystem you created. The hologram shifted, showing other worlds. Marcus recognized each one. Vorlak, with its methane storms now transformed into seasonal rain cycles that nourished vast agricultural plains. Theta Prime, where radiation-soaked wastelands had become lush forests that actually fed on background radiation, cleaning the environment as they grew. Each world has become something unprecedented, Veltar explained. Your genetic templates did not simply grow. They evolved with purpose, as if guided by conscious intent. Within a generation, they began producing atmospheric processors organically, living systems that terraform planets from within. Marcus felt dizzy. That's not how evolution works. Random mutation doesn't create goal-directed changes. Random? Sekla laughed, the sound sharp as breaking metal. There was nothing random about your work, human. Every modification you made, every species you introduced, carried the pattern of your mind, your refusal to accept defeat, your determination to find life in the impossible. These became part of their genetic structure. The hologram changed again, showing a scene that made Marcus's knees weak. It was a vast bioengineering facility, but not built from metal and plastic. It was grown, a living structure that pulsed with the same warm light as the seed pod in his hands. Within its organic chambers, he could see the cultivation of new species, the development of terraforming organisms, the careful nurturing of life. The beings on your garden worlds have become gardeners themselves, Veltar said quietly. They carry your vision forward, spreading life to dead worlds throughout their sectors. In 12 years, they have brought 47 additional planets to full biological viability. 47, Marcus repeated numbly. And they are not slowing down, Mordun added. Each new world joins the network, sharing genetic templates and biological innovations. They call themselves the synthesis. The merger of your human vision with alien adaptation. Marcus stared at the images, trying to process what he was seeing. His desperate last-minute interventions, his violation of council protocols, had grown into something beyond his wildest dreams. Why show me this now? What do you want from me? Veltar deactivated the hologram and studied Marcus with those burning eyes. Because the council has noticed, and they are afraid. The words hung in the thin air like a death sentence. Marcus had always known this moment might come, had prepared for it in his darker moments. How afraid? Afraid enough to deploy the sterilization fleet, Sekla said, her voice carrying deadly calm. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. The sterilization fleet was the Council's ultimate tool. A collection of automated warships designed to cleanse entire solar systems of unauthorized biological activity. They had been used only twice in galactic history. Both times to contain plague outbreaks that threatened to spread beyond containment. They can't, he whispered. The populations, the cities, the ecosystems, billions of lives, Veltar confirmed, all to be erased because they grew from your work, because they prove that the Council's cautious, committee-approved methods are inferior to human innovation and determination. Marcus gripped the seed pod tighter, feeling its pulse accelerate as if responding to his stress. When? The fleet is already being assembled, Mordun reported. Our intelligence suggests they will move within standard months. Zirion will be first. They consider it the primary contamination source. We have to warn them, Marcus said immediately. Get word to the garden worlds, help them evacuate or defend themselves. Evacuate 47 worlds? Billions of beings? Sekla shook her head. Even if it were possible, where would they go? The Council's reach extends throughout the core systems. Then what do you propose? Veltar stepped closer, her imposing presence somehow reassuring rather than threatening. The Kithara have observed the Council for centuries. We have seen them grow complacent, bureaucratic, concerned more with maintaining their authority than protecting life. This plan to destroy the garden worlds confirms our assessment. The Council has forgotten the first principle of civilization, Mordun said. That life must be protected and nurtured, not regulated and constrained. Which brings us to our proposal, Sekla continued. The Kithara Collective controls over 300 worlds in the Rim territories. We have maintained our independence from the Council through strength of arms and unity of purpose. Marcus began to see where this was heading. You want to protect the garden worlds. We want to do more than that, Veltar replied. We want to offer them full membership in the Kithara Collective, protection, resources, and the freedom to continue their work without council interference. And in return, they share their biological innovations with Kithara worlds. Many of our planets are harsh, barely habitable. Your living terraforming systems could transform them into garden worlds themselves. Marcus turned away, walking toward his atmospheric processor while his mind raced. The machine that had kept him alive for 12 years suddenly seemed pathetically small compared to the vast forces now in motion. What does any of this have to do with me? I'm one man in exile. I can't influence galactic politics. Cannot? Veltar's voice carried a note of challenge. Or will not. The garden worlds know their creator, Sekla said. They have preserved records of your work, your methods, your genetic modifications. But more than that, they carry your pattern in their very structure, your refusal to accept the impossible. The seed pod you hold contains their message, Mordoon explained. Not words, but something deeper. The genetic memory of 7 worlds, all crying out for their father to lead them home. Marcus looked down at the pulsing pod in his hands. As he watched, its surface began to change, growing transparent to reveal the complex structures within. It was not a single seed but hundreds, each one glowing with its own light, each one containing the accumulated evolution of an entire world. We offer you a choice, Marcus Chen, Veltar said formally. Return with us to the garden worlds. Take your place as the leader of the synthesis. Guide 47 worlds and their billions of inhabitants toward a future where life flourishes without the Council's constraints. Or remain here, Sekla added. Continue your solitary work while the sterilization fleet reduces your greatest achievements to radioactive ash. Marcus closed his eyes and felt the weight of impossible decision pressing down on him. For 12 years, he had told himself that exile was freedom, that his small shelter and growing plants were enough. But deep down, he had always known this moment would come. The universe was too vast, too full of possibility, for one man to tend alone. If I come with you, he said slowly, what exactly would you expect me to do? I'm not a military leader or a politician. You are the human gardener, Veltar replied with fierce conviction. The man who looks at dead ground and sees potential for life. The man who refuses to accept that anything is truly impossible. The garden worlds have grown beyond your initial work, Mordoon explained. But they still follow the patterns you established. Your vision of cooperative evolution, of life helping life to flourish. They need that vision now more than ever. The Council will not give up easily, Sekla warned. Even with Kithara protection, there will be conflict. They cannot allow the synthesis to exist. It proves too clearly that their methods are flawed. Marcus opened his eyes and looked around at his shelter one last time. Every surface told the story of his 12 years alone. Repairs made with improvised materials. Growing chambers built from salvaged components. Air recyclers that should have failed years ago but kept running through his stubborn refusal to let them stop. The sterilization fleet, he said finally. How long before it reaches the garden worlds? 18 standard months to Zirion, Veltar replied. Perhaps 20. To reach all 47 worlds. Time enough? For what? Marcus looked down at the seed pod, watching its internal lights pulse in complex patterns. 7 worlds worth of evolution, of adaptation, of life finding new ways to flourish. 47 worlds growing from that foundation. Billions of lives hanging in the balance. Time enough to show the Council what humans really think of their sterilization fleet, he said quietly. The 3 Kithara hunters exchanged glances that Marcus caught from the corner of his eye. There was something in their body language. Anticipation. Maybe even excitement. You will come? Veltar asked. Marcus hefted the seed pod, feeling its living weight. Somewhere in that warm glow were the voices of 7 worlds, calling him home. Somewhere beyond the stars, 47 garden worlds were preparing for war while their children reached across space for their father's hand. I'll come, he said. But we do this my way. No unnecessary bloodshed. No scorched earth tactics. We save every life we can. Even council lives. Even if they seek to destroy everything you have built? Marcus smiled. And for the first time in 12 years, it reached his eyes. Especially then. Life finds a way, remember? Even when the odds seem impossible. Veltar bowed her head in formal acknowledgement. Then we leave when you are ready, human gardener. Marcus looked around his shelter one more time, then began gathering the few possessions that mattered. His genetic templates, his cultivation notes, his jury-rigged tools that had kept him alive when sophisticated equipment would have failed. The dead planet of Kepler 442c would soon be alone again. But it would not stay dead. The atmospheric processor would continue its work, the growing chambers would spread their influence, and someday, maybe sooner than anyone expected, this forgotten rock would bloom with impossible life, just like its gardener had taught it to do. The journey to Xerion took 3 weeks through hyperspace. But for Marcus, it passed in a blur of preparation and disbelief. The Cathara ship was a marvel of bioengineering itself, its living hull adapting to cosmic radiation, while its neural networks processed navigation data faster than any computer. Veltar explained that their technology had evolved to blend organic and mechanical systems, much like the garden worlds had grown beyond pure biology. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace near Xerion, Marcus understood why the Council was afraid. The planet that hung before them bore no resemblance to the glass wasteland he remembered. Xerion had become a living jewel, its surface a tapestry of impossible blues and greens that seemed to pulse with their own light. Even from orbit, Marcus could see the organic cities that grew like coral formations along the coastlines, their bioluminescent spires reaching towards space like welcoming arms. The population centers are fully integrated ecosystems, Sekla explained as their ship descended through an atmosphere that tasted sweet and clean. No waste. No pollution. Every inhabitant contributes to the planetary health through symbiotic biological interfaces. They wanted to meet you at the primary cultivation center, Mordoon added. The descendant organisms specifically requested your presence there. Marcus pressed his face to the viewing port as they approached what he assumed was a landing facility. Instead, he found himself looking at a vast garden that stretched beyond the horizon, filled with plants and structures that defied classification. Some were clearly technological, atmospheric processors and bioreactors hummed with visible energy. Others were pure biology, trees that bore fruit in metallic colors, flowers that generated their own electromagnetic fields, grasses that seemed to bend toward their ship in coordinated waves. They know you are coming, Veltar said quietly. The entire biosphere is responding to your presence. The ship settled onto a landing pad that was not built but grown, living wood that adjusted its density and configuration to accommodate their vessel. As the airlock opened, Marcus caught his first breath of Xerion air in 12 years. It was clean beyond anything he had experienced, rich with oxygen but carrying subtle scents of growing things he could not identify. A delegation waited for them on the landing pad, and Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. They were human in basic structure, but changed in ways that spoke of conscious evolution. Their skin held traces of chlorophyll that allowed them to photosynthesize in direct sunlight. Their eyes had adapted to process a broader spectrum of light, giving them an almost luminous quality. Most striking were the symbiotic organisms that grew from their bodies, living tools and interfaces that connected them directly to the planetary ecosystem. Their leader stepped forward, a woman whose calm dignity reminded Marcus of ancient Earth's park rangers. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate with the very air around them. Marcus Chen, she said simply, we have waited so long for you to come home. Home? Marcus repeated, still overwhelmed by what he was seeing. You created us, the woman replied. Not just our bodies or our world, but our purpose. We are what we are because you refused to let us die. She gestured to the impossible garden around them. We are your children in the truest sense. We carry your vision forward. I'm Dr. Sarah Voss, she continued. Or I was, before the change. I was part of the first research team to study the organisms you left behind. When they began their rapid evolution, we had a choice: observe from outside, or become part of the process. Marcus stared at her, trying to process what she was telling him. You integrated with the terraforming organisms? We merged, Dr. Voss corrected gently. Human consciousness and biological innovation, working together toward a common goal. Your goal: to bring life to dead places and help it flourish. She led them through the garden, and Marcus saw wonders that challenged everything he thought he knew about biology and ecology. Trees that grew in perfect spirals, their roots forming computational networks that monitored and adjusted atmospheric composition in real time. Flowers that opened and closed in response to stellar radiation, regulating planetary temperature through coordinated photosynthetic cycles. Animals that were not quite animals. Living beings that had been consciously designed to fill specific ecological niches while maintaining full sentience and free will. How many of you are there? Marcus asked. On Xerion, approximately 12 million human-descended individuals have undergone full integration. Doctor, Voss replied. But the synthesis extends beyond humanity. We have welcomed refugees from 43 different species, all of whom have found ways to contribute to the collective ecosystem. They reached the heart of the cultivation center, and Marcus found himself standing before something that took his breath away. It was a tree. But calling it that was like calling a supernova a candle. The massive organism stretched nearly a kilometer into the sky, its trunk a complex weaving of different species that had grown together into a single living entity. Its canopy was a forest unto itself, containing atmospheric processors that worked on a planetary scale, while its roots extended deep into the planet's core, drawing energy directly from geothermal sources. The World Tree, Dr. Voss said with obvious pride. It began as one of your atmospheric processing plants that achieved consciousness and decided to become something greater. Now, it serves as the central nervous system for the entire planet's ecosystem. Marcus approached the massive trunk and placed his hand on its living surface. The bark was warm to the touch and pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to match his heartbeat. As soon as he made contact, images flooded his mind, not his own memories, but the accumulated experiences of an entire world. He saw the first desperate days after his exile, when his experimental organisms had faced extinction before finding ways to adapt. He experienced their first conscious thoughts, their decision to grow beyond their original programming, their gradual realization that they could become something unprecedented. But more than that, he felt their love for their creator. Not worship or blind devotion, but the deep affection of children who had grown to understand their father's vision and chosen to make it their own. The Council's fleet, Marcus said, pulling his hand away from the tree with effort. How long do we have? 16 months to Xerion, Veltar replied. Our scouts report they are indeed mobilizing the full sterilization fleet. Over 300 automated warships, Dr. Voss nodded grimly. We are aware of the threat. All 47 garden worlds have been preparing defensive measures. What kind of defenses? Marcus asked. The same kind you taught us, she replied with a smile that reminded him why he had fought so hard to save these worlds in the first place. We looked at an impossible situation and found a way to make life flourish. She led them to an observation platform that had grown from the world tree's trunk, giving them a view of Xerion's orbital space. At first, Marcus saw only stars and the distant glow of the system's primary sun. Then his eyes adjusted, and he realized he was looking at something that should not exist. Space around Xerion was alive. Vast organisms drifted in carefully maintained orbits, their bioluminescent bodies forming protective networks around the planet. Some were clearly spacecraft, living vessels that could transport thousands of beings while maintaining full life support through biological processes. Others were pure ecosystem, floating gardens that processed stellar radiation and cosmic dust into useful materials. The orbital synthesis, Dr. Voss explained. Every garden world has developed similar defensive networks. We don't build space stations. We grow them. Impressive, Mordun said with professional appreciation. But can they stand against Council warships? The Council builds weapons to destroy static targets, Dr. Voss replied. Their sterilization protocols are designed to cleanse planets from orbit. They have never faced an enemy that can adapt and evolve faster than their targeting systems can track. Marcus studied the orbital formations with growing understanding. You're not planning to fight them directly. We are planning to convert them, Doctor, Voss confirmed. Every Council warship runs on automated systems that follow rigid programming. But all technology is ultimately vulnerable to biological intervention, especially when that intervention can think and adapt in real time. You want to turn their own fleet against them? We want to heal their fleet, she corrected gently. The same way you healed dead worlds. The Council has forgotten that their machines are part of the same universe that gave rise to biological life. We intend to remind them. That same way you healed dead world. Veltar looked skeptical. Council warships have biological containment protocols. They are designed to resist exactly this kind of intervention. Designed by beings who think in terms of static defenses against known threats, Dr. Voss replied. They have never faced organisms that can rewrite their own genetic code in response to environmental challenges. Marcus felt a chill of understanding. You're going to evolve faster than they can adapt their defenses. In the 12 years since your exile, we have compressed millions of years of evolution into conscious, directed change. Dr. Voss confirmed. We can develop new biological approaches to any technological challenge within hours or days, not generations. But what about the crews? Marcus asked. The Council ships aren't fully automated. There are beings aboard those vessels. Dr. Voss smiled, and Marcus saw in her expression the same determination that had driven him to save worlds against impossible odds. We will offer them the same choice you offered us, death in a sterile universe, or life in a growing one. Over the following weeks, Marcus traveled to each of the 47 garden worlds, witnessing preparations that defied every principle of military strategy he had ever learned. There were no weapons in any conventional sense, no massive industrial complexes churning out instruments of destruction. Instead, he saw life adapting itself for purposes that should have been impossible. On Vorlak, atmospheric organisms had learned to survive in the vacuum of space, forming living clouds that could engulf and disable electronic systems while remaining completely invisible to most sensors. On Theta Prime, radiation-feeding plants had developed the ability to generate and direct energy fields that could disrupt hyperspace navigation. Each world had found its own solution to the seemingly impossible problem of defending against a technologically superior enemy. But it was on the original Zerion that Marcus witnessed the most ambitious preparation of all. Deep beneath the World Tree's root system, Dr. Voss showed him something that challenged his understanding of what biological organisms could accomplish. We call it the Genesis Protocol, she explained as they descended through living tunnels that glowed with their own light. It began as a theoretical application of your original terraforming techniques, but evolved into something much more ambitious. They emerged into a vast underground chamber filled with organic machinery that pulsed and hummed with directed purpose. At its center was a pool of something that looked like liquid starlight, constantly shifting, constantly changing, but somehow maintaining perfect coherence. Concentrated evolutionary potential, Dr. Voss said simply. Every genetic breakthrough achieved on every garden world, distilled into its essential components, and held in quantum suspension. Marcus stared at the impossible substance. What does it do? It can turn anything into anything else, she replied. Given sufficient time and energy, it can convert a grain of sand into a fully functional ecosystem, or transform a dead asteroid into a living world. It is your vision made manifest, the absolute refusal to accept that any situation is truly hopeless. You're planning to use this against the Council fleet? We are planning to use it to save the Council fleet, Dr. Voss corrected, and everyone aboard those ships. When they arrive expecting to find dead worlds waiting for sterilization, they will instead encounter something unprecedented in galactic history, the opportunity to become part of something greater than themselves. Marcus felt the weight of impossible responsibility settling on his shoulders. For 12 years, he had tended his small garden in exile, thinking himself forgotten by the universe. Now he stood at the center of a transformation that could reshape the entire galaxy. And beings beyond counting looked to him for guidance. What if they refuse? He asked quietly. What if the Council would rather destroy everything than admit they were wrong? Doctor. Voss placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, her touch warm with the life force that flowed through all the garden worlds. Then we will grieve for them, and we will continue growing life in the universe until there is no room left for death and sterility. But we will not give up, she continued, her voice carrying the same determination that had driven Marcus to save 7 worlds against impossible odds. Because you taught us that life always finds a way, even when the odds seem hopeless. Marcus looked around at the Genesis Protocol facility, at the organic machinery that could transform dead matter into living ecosystems, at the impossible substance that contained the evolutionary potential of 47 worlds. He thought of the Cathara warriors who had risked everything to bring him home, of the billions of beings who had built new lives on worlds he had saved, of the Council fleet approaching with the power to destroy everything they had accomplished. And for the first time since his exile began, Marcus Chen smiled with absolute confidence. Then let's show them what gardeners really do, he said. Let's plant life in places where they think only death can grow. The Genesis Protocol pulsed with renewed energy, as if responding to his words. Throughout the chamber, organic systems hummed with increasing activity, as 47 worlds prepared to teach the galaxy that some things were more powerful than weapons, more enduring than governments, and more irresistible than the human refusal to accept defeat. The sterilization fleet was coming. But they were about to discover that the human gardener had been busy, and dead worlds had a way of blooming when no one expected them to. Life, Marcus had learned long ago, always found a way.